In Formula One, everyone is racing for something. During each Grand Prix, on every inch of racetrack, teams and drivers are fighting. And the midfield fight is every bit as intense as the battle for the lead. 5 teams are racing to finish highest in the standings and win millions of dollars in extra prize money. That is what AlphaTauri is racing for, and its technical director, Jody Egginton, is pushing flat out.
We want to be in the top 5 in the Constructors Championship. Last year we had a car to do it and we didn't do it, and that hurts.
I'm Tom Clarkson, and this F1 Beyond the Grid is all about Jody's journey. From newly qualified school teacher to motorsport's technical peak.
Resigned from my other job 6 weeks in, which was, I think my mother was not so impressed with that, sort of giving all of this hard work, effort up to get a decent job and give it up to go and play racing cars. And I was in, and it was fantastic, and I loved it. And then since then, I've never wanted to, do anything else really.
If you want to be an engineer in F1, listen up. Jody's got some advice for you. He's also got stories of working with big personalities like Ken Tyrell, one of the old school name-on-the-car team bosses, and Vijay Mallya, the businessman whose Force India team sometimes stunned the sport in the 2000s. Jody's seen F1's high-tech transition from pencil drawings to virtual models, and he's struggled for survival at a brand new F1 team. Those worries are in the past. Today, AlphaTauri work closely with Red Bull, and Jody's got some fascinating insight into how that relationship works. He had an insider's view of Pierre Gasly's return to the team from Red Bull Racing, and he's helping Yuki Tsunoda to score more and swear less. We sat down to talk about all that and much more at the British Grand Prix. I hope you enjoy our conversation. Jody, it's wonderful to have you on the show. Thank you very much for your time. How's everything?
Yeah, it's quite good. It's been obviously a very busy year, very busy 18 months with the regulation change. But we're up and running, we're racing, and we're well into the season now. And it's intense as always.
It is, and we are almost at the halfway point now. How do you feel it's gone from an AlphaTauri point of view so far?
Honestly, stepping back and sort of looking at the big picture, we've unfortunately missed a few opportunities to score points, so we've got less points than we feel we should have at this point in the season. There's a few things that have not gone our way in races with safety cars and other things. Reliability's not been as good as it should have been in a couple of instances, which has cost some points. But on the flip side, we've learnt a lot about the car. The car's developing quite well, and there's half the season or more than half the season to go, so we're confident we can recover and start moving forwards with this package.
Seems to me that most teams have had reliability issues this year. Given that the power units are the same fundamentally as last year, why have these new regs been throwing up so many problems for the teams?
I think there's numerous reasons, but from our own experience, we've repackaged a lot of things with the new aero regulations. We've got the same parts or modified parts in different positions on the car. The window the car operates in is different in terms of stiffnesses and ride heights, and there's certain parts running in different environments. And then on top of that, there's just things which sometimes fail, and you learn as you go along. There's a lot of new parts on the car as well with the new aero regs, etc., and you make a change. There's always a risk that there's a banana skin and you fall over it. And for us, unfortunately, in the races, we've had a couple of instances of things not going as we wanted. A DRS flap issue. But being one of them, easy to fix, but until you're faced with a problem, you don't recognise it.
What have been the most appealing technical aspects of these new cars?
The big technical aspect change is the change in the aero regulations. It's been fantastic, with these new cars, and it's forced us to look at things very differently. We're all very familiar and enjoyed the old regulations. They evolve year on year, and we sort of knew where we were going, and we were making progress, and it was good. But then when you're faced with essentially a clean sheet of paper, and you're saying, okay, what's going to make these cars tick? How are these aero regulations going to work? And you have to get creative, and you right back to the concept stage of the car, you're saying, okay, how do we think this car is going to respond to these regulations? Which directions do we need to go in? And as engineers, that's fantastic, something new. It's not without risk, and it's a lot of work, and we all grumble that it's a massive task. But I think that's been the most interesting bit, that it's the biggest change and the closest to a clean sheet of paper we've seen in a long while.
The introduction of these new cars was delayed due to COVID. With more time to think, did you change your approach to the regs during the lull?
I mean, obviously, as you say, the regulations were delayed, and there was there was an amnesty we weren't allowed to develop. But you can't stop people thinking, and it gives people time to consider things. But every time you answer a question, you typically have another 10 questions. So I think there's pros and cons to it. We had a clear view of what we wanted to do, as every team would have done, and we probably had more things to look at than the available wind tunnel time or physical time or manpower or whatever. So we're still learning now. But yeah, there was pros and cons, really. I mean, we shouldn't forget as well that although this car was delayed a year, we still had a bit on preparing another car for the interim year, although there was a lot of carryover. So the amount of extra headspace we got wasn't that great, because we still had to do like an infill in the interim with the 2021 car, which was a strong evolution of 2020.
Now, you mentioned the wind tunnel. How did swapping from a 50% tunnel in Bicester to a 60% tunnel in Bedford upset the design process?
I mean, it's an extra activity. There's no getting around it. Normally, if you're established in a wind tunnel, you understand how the tunnel works. You prepare your model and you evolve from one project, migrating to the next. Going from 50% to 60%, it's extra work. There's no getting away from that. And the aero guys had to prepare a 60% model. That in itself is a big chunk of work. Our 2021 car was born. The launch spec car came at 50%. And then we migrated that car to 60% so we could get some form of understanding of how the car responded differently at 50 and 60%.
How does it respond differently?
I mean, it's
60%.
60%. You've got a it's a bigger model, and all the benefits with fidelity and representation come with that. But you have to learn the new wind tunnel as well. We were going to a new tunnel we were not familiar with. As customers, we had to understand how the wind tunnel, how the tool worked as well. So because we had data on our car at 50%, we went to 60%. We knew roughly what we were looking for. And without going into detail, certain bits of the car responded differently and better at 60%. So we understood where maybe the 50% tunnel was not giving us the clearest picture. But then on top of that, there's other things you've got to learn in the other direction. So that was a good opportunity. But then in parallel, we were allowed to get going with the 2022 car. So we had to get that into the tunnel as well, another 60% model. So it was intense, and it was our decision to move tunnel, and looking at the medium and long-term benefits, they're clearly there at 60%, but it was a lot of work and the guys did a good job. But it was intense, and somewhere along the line there's compromise. Short-term, there always is, but the philosophy is we'll recover that medium to long-term, and I think that will be the case. But there's no way to make a change like that and guarantee that it's seamless. We did a good job, but it wasn't seamless.
And you share the new tunnel with Red Bull Racing.
Yeah.
How does that work?
I mean, essentially, the way the wind tunnel regulations are now and the amount of occupancy each team's allowed to have, it makes sharing a wind tunnel viable from a time perspective. And we get the amount of time that we're allowed by the regulations, and Red Bull get what they're allowed. And there's a handover process, and we operate in a certain part of the building that they don't go near, and they operate in a part of the building that we don't go near. It's just like renting a tunnel, essentially. We could go to Toyota or somewhere else. You have to be a bit more disciplined than when you've got your own tunnel on site that you can rush things through a bit differently. But essentially, we're both using a facility. They use it for an amount of time, we use it for an amount of time, and when we're finished, we turn the lights off and go, and they turn the lights back on again and crack on with what they're doing. So it's just another tool that you rent. So it's fine for us. It's just different to using our own tunnel. But my view was that the benefits of going to 60% outweighed the compromise of maybe not having quite as much freedom as you do have when you've got your own facility on site.
Right, you wanted to go to 60%. How do you set about trying to find a 60% tunnel for those of us who don't know?
I mean, there are. I mean, for us,
how many are there in the world?
I mean, yeah, there's a number of 60% facilities available for hire. I mean, Toyota, when they were in Formula One, actually had two 60% wind tunnels. They're out of Formula One now. Those facilities can be hired. I have in a former life with another team. We've used that facility, but in all honesty, the way the aero regs went, and with Red Bull Racing having a 60% wind tunnel and having a slot, it was a no-brainer to go there. Going to my bosses and suggesting we were going to go somewhere else would have been, why would we do that? We've got one of those. So the regulations permitted it. Aston Martin do a similar thing with the Mercedes wind tunnel. So it's a logical progression for us to go to that tunnel. It was the most obvious one to use. It's in the UK, just up the road in Bedford from our base in Bicester. The Toyota tunnel's in Cologne. So, it's more of an exercise to do that. So it was sort of a no-brainer. That was never really a question. It was find a good slot and a good time to make the transition. I was always keen to do it since I've been responsible for the project. It was where I wanted to go. There was no way we were going to build our own 60% tunnel. That was not viable. So it was a case of what's the best time to do it? The regulation change seemed logical. The idea to launch a car in one tunnel and then attempt to move it over to another tunnel to validate it was a good idea. It was extra work, and it's worked quite well. So there is compromise, as I said, but I think we've made the best of what is a challenging thing to do. So I'm fairly happy with it. And at the end of the day, it was ultimately my call from a technical perspective. So, it is as it is. But I'm satisfied we've made the best of it so far.
And when we look at these 2022 regs as a whole, have they achieved the objectives set out by Formula One?
I think on a macro level, and let's not forget we're early into year one still, I think that they have. I mean, you can follow a car now closer, losing significantly less downforce. I think we've proven that. There's changes in tyres as well, which also aid it. So I think by being able to follow closer, you're setting up the conditions for an overtake. Now, whether overtaking is never going to be easy in Formula One. If it was, people would complain saying it's too easy. So I think the conditions that the regulations have brought us are good, and it's allowing us as a first year to say, we're now in a position where it's easier to race. So I think there's more fine-tuning and adjustments that can be made to move it further forward. But looking at the main objective, which was to make following easier for the car behind, it's achieved the objective, I would say, at this stage.
Knowing what you know about your car and about other cars on the grid, is there anything you'd have done differently with the AT03?
The answer to that, and I think everyone, to a greater or lesser extent, every technical director or design team would say yes to that. Nothing fundamental, but there's some, people launch cars, you see fantastic ideas. You might have said, we had a look at that, but for us it wasn't something that worked quite well. But then you see maybe how they're combining it with other parts of the car aerodynamically or mechanically, and you think, let's have a look at that again. So that natural process of thinking, we looked at that, but we didn't carry it forward. Look how they've interpreted it. You always do that. I think you learn a lot. We learn a lot from what we see from other people's cars. We also learn a lot from what other teams don't say about their cars. Sometimes you can read a technical press release and go, right, what are they not saying? Because people want to talk, but they don't always want to tell you the details. So I think there's things on the car that we could say, we'll look at that again. I mean, we're going to evolve the car. We're developing the car still now. There's certain features on floors and other things that we've looked at again and gone, it's working better now. It's now working with that component, or the flow structure it's setting up aerodynamically we can make use of in this way or that way. So to answer your question, yes. But on the flip side, I'm not fundamentally sitting here and going, oh God, our concept's wrong, because I don't believe it is. I think we're in a similar vein to a lot of teams, and now it's just a development race to learn and improve the car as quick as you can.
And can you explain in layman's terms the advantages of pushrod front suspension? I
mean, again, it's if we look at it from the aero perspective, I can say it now, we spent a great deal of time looking at pull rod front suspension as well, and at the point we had to freeze that, and that sort of decision is a relatively early one because it's tied into chassis. The pushrod was more performant for us, but the teams at pull rod, clearly they had a different view at that moment. But also, at that snapshot in time, people's floor development could have been quite different, front wing development could have been quite different. So it's where you are in that moment that you've got to make the decision. Historically, we can talk about structural benefit of push rod and a packaging benefit of pull rod or something, but ultimately, it's an aerodynamic decision. And the fact that we've got quite a diverse approach to it on the grid tells you that both can be made to work. And the key thing is, I'd rather have a push rod that we understood and worked than a pull rod that we thought was great, but we hadn't quite got to work yet. So it's, but it's an aerodynamic discussion at the end of the day.
Red Bull Racing, how much crossover is there between your team and them? Does Helmut Marko have a towering presence over you as he does Red Bull Racing?
If we look at the big picture, I mean, AlphaTauri as a team, historically in its former guys as Toro Rosso has been responsible for bringing young talent on, and Helmut's a big part of that, and Franz is a big part of that as well. So on the sporting level, we receive the young drivers, we work with the young drivers, and we're very involved in that process. That's unchanged regardless as if we've got a Red Bull gearbox in the back or not. That's the thing, that's part of our being. On a technical level, there's parts we can purchase now, and we're 3 or 4 years into a synergy with Red Bull. We've been taking parts off them. I'm fully supportive of that as a technical director. It suits our needs quite well. The rules are quite clear. So we buy those parts and we make use of them, and we make sure we use them properly and don't abuse them and are careful with them. But in terms of our technical decision making, we're independent. If we want to take their gearbox, we take their gearbox. I don't get a say in what it is. It is what it is. We'll look at it and say, we'll make use of that and design the car around it. But we're an independent team, and we just happen to make use of their parts, as other teams do, really. But we set our objectives from headquarters in terms of what we're meant to deliver, and our overarching objective is to be a consistent feature in the top 5 of the championship. That's where we want to be. That's where we are, and I'm tasked with delivering that technically. I'm sure it's a discussion point between Helmut and fans on many occasions whether we're delivering or not. But in terms of what we do technically, we're independent, and I'm responsible and accountable for what we put out as a car.
You say this team develops driver talent. What about engineering talent?
You know what, I think it does as well. I mean, I've said this before, and we are a sort of a relatively young team. You know, our engineering staff are fairly young. We've got a strong graduate employment program on the design side, aero side, and engineering side, and we make use of that. You know, we bring young drivers through. There's young engineers on the team. We've got a couple of guys at this race, Silverstone, first time at the track as a performance engineering this event. They've done it from the factory, they've shadowed, they've done all the background stuff, but you know, they're here for the first time as young engineers at their first event live on the front line, and I think that's a fantastic thing to see, and it's a testament to the team. So yes, I think we are developing young talent on many different levels.
How does a graduate join this team?
I mean, at the end of the day, you know, we're always on the lookout for clever young people, and the obvious and the normal routine is through a placement year, a graduate student intern programmer. You know, you can be 2 years into your mechanical engineering degree and you submit a CV to do a year out, as we call it, with an F1 team, and we have a rigorous interview and assessment process, and we get hundreds of applications, and we're typically taking across the technical department probably 10 or 15 each year, and they get a year either moving around departments or working in specific departments, be it aero, design, R&D, vehicle performance group. And then at the end of that year, they go back, they finish their degree, and you know, hopefully are successful in their studies. And then they're towards the front of the queue for any recruitment that we need to do of young junior engineers. They're also available to other teams, of course. They've got that on their CV, they've got that year's experience, they're potentially committed to working in motorsport. So that's how we do it. And we take a lot of our graduates from our student placement program, or if we can pick other graduates up from other programs. You know, there's a lot of teams doing the same things. The sad reality is that we can't take everybody on board that we train up. So that's the main way of doing it in the junior level. And then we've got a good development program. There's, you know, as I said, there's people coming trackside now who 4 or 5 years ago were these people coming out of university green, and now they're at the point where they're making their debut trackside.
Jody, you've been in the sport 25 years, more.
Yeah.
How has the job of an engineer changed in that time? Are these new guys coming into the same world that you were 25 years ago?
Certainly not. They're certainly not coming into the same world. I mean, if we just look at it on the scale of Formula One, when I finished university and was keen to get involved in it, a big team would have been 250, 300 people. A small team would have been 100. Now we're looking at a small team of 400 people and a big team, you know, probably upwards of 800. So the amount of specialisms increase. You know, you're recruiting people more into specific roles. When I left university, my first role was as a designer, and I was involved in all manner of things. Okay, these people need a bit of help. Go and design a bit of that. Go and do a bit of this, pit equipment, fuel system. And you were getting exposed to a lot more things. Now you specialise a lot earlier. You can still move around, but the level of expertise these guys have as they're picking up is fantastic. You know, they're super experts within a couple of years, and they're not all-rounders, so it's different. You know, you can move around and pick up skills in other places, but the level of skills they've got is fantastically high.
And how has the budget cap affected your ability to attract new talent? In that, are we seeing budget limitations, meaning that some of the best talent that would have come to Formula One 5-10 years ago is now leaking out the side and going to NASA, for example?
People are always interested by Formula One. It's high-tech, and you know, working for, you know, in the space industry or something has a similar appeal. For us, you know, in terms of where we are with budget cap and where we were before, it's not a million miles away. So our techniques for attracting people are not really changing. Also, as a smaller team, we can probably offer a more diverse experience to a graduate. You know, we are a smaller team. We probably expect a slightly wider range of work from our graduates. So there's benefits, you know. I mean, someone can be working on a particular project and we'll say, okay, this one's just come in. Okay, let's get one of the graduates to have a look at it. And all of a sudden they're jumping into something else. And as a smaller team, I think we can offer that. Also, it's easier to follow the process in a smaller team. So I think we're still desirable on many ways. The people who want to get stuck in, a smaller team has advantages. On the flip side, maybe a bigger team has different advantages because you know, they're more towards the front of the grid. Maybe you'll get exposure to a slightly different range of things, and you know, the skills you're picking up are certainly different. But yeah, I still think for a young engineering graduate, Formula One is an attractive business, budget cap or no budget cap.
It's time for a quick break. This is technically an ad break, but our partners at Calm want you to focus on yourself for a moment. So take a deep breath and let it out. Relax wherever you're holding your tension. Self-care shouldn't be an afterthought, and Calm can help you make it a priority while giving you the tools to help improve the way you feel. It's important that we all take the time to tune in, recenter, and recharge our emotional batteries. One way to do that is through meditation. If you want to explore the huge benefits that meditation can have on your well-being, all you need to do is download the Calm app and you'll find a whole library of guided meditation designed to help you reduce stress and anxiety. I often tune in to their curated music playlists full of tracks to help me clear my head and focus my energy. And if sleep is something you're struggling with, you'll find a collection of imaginative sleep stories to help with that too. More than 100 million people around the world use Calm to take care of their minds. Discover what works for you. For listeners of the show, Calm is offering an exclusive offer of 40% off a Calm premium subscription at calm.com/grid. So go to calm.com/grid for 40% off unlimited access to Calm's entire library. That's calm.com/grid. Let's talk about your journey next. I want to wind the clock back to 1996, to your first year in Formula One with Tyrrell. How did you end up there?
It was. I did the usual thing. I did my degree. Then after my degree, I did a certificate of postgraduate education. So I qualified as a teacher, but I didn't really want to be a teacher. I just thought it would be another string to the bow for another day. And I'd always really been into motorsport. I was really keen on it since I can remember. And I'd done the usual applications and had several interviews with teams. I think Reynard was one of them, and Tag McLaren. But the clock was ticking, and so I took a job with a large engineering company. I think I was 6 weeks in, and I got a letter from Tyrrell saying, come in for an interview. So, okay, in for an interview. I think I had about 20 minutes with Mike Gascoigne and Harvey Postlethwaite, and they basically said, look, you know CAD, you can drive a CAD machine. You know a little bit of engineering, but not much really. But anyway, you're sort of what we need. This is what we can offer. We can give you 6 months' work, yes or no. So it's like, yes, okay. And then resigned from my other job 6 weeks in, which was, I think my mother was not so impressed with that, sort of giving all of this hard work, effort up to get a decent job and give it up to go and play racing cars. And I was in and off and going, and it was fantastic. I was using CAD. There were still people on drawing boards until at that stage, so I was sort of the CAD monkey, doing a bit of everything. And it was fantastic, and I loved it. And then since then, I've never wanted to, do anything else really.
But the first attraction for you was engineering, or was it Formula One, or were they together?
It was motorsport. I'd always been a massive fan of motorsport. I played around with cars at home, built a couple of motorbikes. I was really into motorbikes and cars and making bits for them and designing bits at home. I was just a nut about it, and I wanted to work in motorsport. I wasn't interested in working for Rover Group or Jaguar. It was motorsport. But because the timing of job offers hadn't come through, I'd accepted something else as an infill. But as soon as the opportunity came, it was fantastic. And to draw bits, even if it was pit equipment or small parts for a Formula One car, was just a dream. So that first 6 months was just being like a sponge and sucking in as much as I could about everything, and probably annoying people with constant questions. But it was great.
What was Harvey Postlethwaite like?
I mean, beyond an interview, I didn't have much exposure to him. I was just sort of the bod in the office. But, listening to him and Mike and, the race engineers and other senior designers, it was just sort of fantastic. You're hanging on every word and everything they're saying, you're thinking about, and sometimes you're not quite sure what they're on about. So you're going away and trying to understand more. So it was just a fantastic learning experience. The things they talked about as bread and butter activities in a design sense. It was just like, okay, I need to learn about that. I need to learn about this. And it was just like being in a toy shop. So, it was just great. And in a small team, because you have to remember, Tyrrell were doing everything, gearbox, everything in-house. And within this small building, but then the engine, a complete Formula One car, was being designed and constructed. And within 10 metres of my desk, there was something else happening in this direction, that direction. It was great, and it was like this small community, and you could see everything going on, the patterns being made for the chassis, the chassis buck, the laminating of the chassis, everything. So you had exposure to everything, and it was just fantastic. You don't see that now. The organisations are so much bigger. So for me, it was just great.
What was the biggest surprise for you, a guy in his early 20s?
The decision-making process, is like, okay, this is what we're going to do, and this is when we're going to do it by. And when you're first exposed to that, and the design reviews and things are happening, and the deadlines are being pushed, and things are moving so quickly from idea to parts being made and tested. Now it's familiar to me, it's normal. In fact, the opposite is true now, it's never quick enough. But then you were like, this is incredible, you know, this needs to be done, that needs to be done. You know, I'd been fiddling with stuff in my garage, making bits, and it takes forever and it's not right, and you do it again. But you're sitting down with all these, or you're watching all these really talented people doing all this stuff, and it comes together so quickly, and you're a small part of that, doing detailed drawings and getting stuff wrong, and people saying, no, don't do it like that, you've got to do it like this, and you dimension it like that, and it's just fantastic. And then all of a sudden, it all starts to click. You know, and it's great.
Was Ken Tyrrell still involved back then?
Yeah, he was. Yeah, Ken was still involved. I mean, you could still see him around, and it was clearly his team, and he had the strong views he was known for. But at the end of the day, it was his name above the door. It was his team. So you know, there's one of the last guys who was his team. It's my responsibility. I'm accountable, and this is what we're doing. It was great. You know, everybody knew the history of Tyrrell. I knew the history, and you know, even turning up there for the interview and seeing the old woodshed where the cars used to be made and everything, it was just fantastic. You know, you look back now and you think, how on earth did they ever do what they did, looking at the complexity of everyone's facilities now and the activities we're doing. But yeah, still the fondest memories ever really working there.
Did you develop a love of cricket through Ken?
I love a sport anyway, being cricket, football, whatever. I mean, I know that Ken was a fan of it, and I probably appreciated it more as I've got older actually. But yeah, it was always a good thing. And you know, there was a fantastic team atmosphere in there. There was guys who'd been there 30, 40 years. You'd be talking to someone and suddenly realise that, you know, they'd have been working on the car back in Jackie Stewart time. It was just amazing, really.
And how much freer were the technical regulations back then?
I mean, in all honesty,
I'm talking 96, not 73.
Yeah, good, because I probably couldn't comment too much on 73. I mean, even in 96, you know, I look back now and look at them, and they were a lot freer and, you know, and a lot smaller as a set of regulations. But honestly, at that point, I was a young guy just doing what I was told. Whatever's put in front of you, you draw it, you do the best thing you can. You go through this process of submitting a drawing, awful lot of red pen being put all over it. No, do it like this, do it like that. You get it back and you think, oh my God, and then, but it's a learning experience. No, you want to do it like this. Why have you done that? You shouldn't do it like that. And so for me, I was more focused on understanding how to become a designer, picking up the skills, understanding how you do something, be it dimensioning or modeling a part. So at that point, I was more keen just to understand how to be a designer and improve, and not really focused on the big picture like I am now, really.
Did you get any exposure to the drivers that year, Mika Salo and Ukyo Katayama?
I mean, I met the drivers, but again, you know, it's like, okay, the drivers were in there having a seat fit, so you'd watch the seat fit, you'd see what went on. But yeah, I was just a guy in the background with an awful lot of design work to do and deadlines to meet, and quietly beaving away and trying to not make mistakes.
So let's talk drivers. Who's the best driver you've ever worked with?
I mean, it's a difficult question, really. I mean, in Formula One, the driver I've learnt the most from and benefited the most from would probably be Giancarlo Fisichella.
Pole position for the Belgian Grand Prix, mate. Pole position.
What position, mate?
Yeah, P1, mate. Not bad.
Giancarlo, an unbelievable session. Your best qualifying position up to this point this year was 13th. Only one question to ask you. How did you do it?
Yeah, I don't know. Actually, I don't know about pole position in Q3. It's amazing. It's fantastic. I'm so happy about that. I need to thank the team because they did a fantastic job, and I didn't expect that result. So I'm really, really happy and really confident for tomorrow.
What about the result for Force India? Their 31st race, and they pick up their first points, and it's a podium as well. Giancarlo Fisichella.
I worked with him 2008, 2009 at Force India. You know, he's a very experienced driver by that time, and the way he could feedback what the car was doing was a great help to me as an engineer to understand some things, and his ability to accept the setup being moved around a lot and giving you feedback on things. You know, you can run all the simulations and you can have all the thoughts you like, but having a driver who can actually tell you this is what it's actually doing, it was very good. So I found that really beneficial. It was a time when there was an upturn in form in Force India as well. We started to be, in 2009, quite competitive, so it all sort of rolled together. So I guess there's a bias also to that as well, but I found that a really good period working with him. Fantastic guy to work with.
What do you want in terms of feedback from a driver? Is it just this is what the car's doing, or do you want them to offer up some potential solutions as well?
It's both, really. I mean, ultimately, you know, their basic job is to go out, take the car to the limit and come back and tell you about it and give you sensible feedback on what they're feeling, what the car's doing. The engineer being safe in the knowledge that they are driving it to the limit, and that they're giving you feedback in priority order and making sure they're emphasising the things which are the biggest problems. But at the same time, the driver can have a different viewpoint on something that you might not have had yourself or seen in the sim tool, or he can just make an observation. All of a sudden you think, or you might think, that's interesting. So it's a mix of both really, but the key point is the driver's got to be able to clearly tell you and accurately tell you what the car's doing, you know, in a sensible priority order really. And when the guys get to Formula One, they're typically at a point where they can do that.
Who else has stood out then?
I mean, away from Formula One, you know, I've done some sports car racing and GT1 with the Aston Martin DBR9 project from ProDrive, and obviously there you're working with 2 or 3 drivers. So that was fantastic as well, because you can't set the car up for one guy and you're just focusing on one. You've got to focus on 3 guys. The car's got to qualify, but then it's got to be raceable. And I'd gone to sports car off the back of DTM, which is the polar opposite, which is put the car on the knife edge, got to do the race, one driver, focused for qualifying, races are relatively short, you know, just driving flat out. You got a sports car race, you've got a 24-hour race, that's the last thing the driver wants. That, you know, if his eyeballs out for 24 hours because the car's on the edge, that's not what you want. So that was the drivers I was involved with there, people like Peter Cox, who had a fantastic engineering brain and could help you to set a drivable car up. And that's a very different approach to DTM, where you put the car on the edge and you've just got to, you know, really nail it. And in DTM, I worked with drivers like Manuel Reuter, who were really capable of giving you what was needed to do that. So there's a range of different requirements. So you put all that together, you know, and I now understand what it's like to engineer a sports car that's got to go 24 hours. And I understand what it's like to try and get a DTM car to the point that you can nail that qualifying lap and then, you know, just sort of get those short races dealt with as you can. And then in Formula One now, which is a combination of all those things and other things. So different drivers give you different learnings and different and different experiences.
I was going to say, so are you using some of that knowledge from the DTM, from sports cars, in Formula One now?
I think you do. I think that, you know, the experiences you get, be it on the design side, because I was involved in the design of the DBR9 GT1 car and also a number of the DTM cars I worked on. You've got the design experience, you've got the engineering experience. And then you always call on some of that. You know, now with with the regulations now this year, and discussion about bouncing and porpoising, we had a bit of that in DTM back in the day. So it wasn't totally new to me. I remember when we first experienced it in DTM as a race engineer, and you call on some of the experiences from that, and you go, okay, 2002, 2003, what did we do? I'm just trying to remember that again. So, you know, I had a lot of exposure to carbon brakes and other things before I got to Formula One. So all of these things, you call on it at certain times. You know, there's all of these cars are producing downforce, that they're all fairly high-tech devices, and there's always some basic engineering experience and learning that you can carry forward, which hopefully shortcuts later on when you're going through the same process.
Jody, is it a coincidence that you, with previous experience of bouncing in the DTM, Adrian Newey with previous experience of ground effect in Formula One itself, are 2 teams that haven't suffered from bouncing as much as other teams?
Short before the car rolled out and was shaking down, we started to have a view that potentially, the aero guys were saying there's potentially something here in CFD that we're seeing, don't see it in the tunnel because of how we run the car. We want to keep an eye on this. So we had a bit of a heads up, and that was the first heads up that bouncing and porpoising could be a thing. We shook the car down, we gathered some data and went, okay, let's get to work on this and try and tidy it up and make the car a little bit more stable. They were not massive issues, but it was there. And honestly, it was only at that point when I started to sort of recall in the memory banks, okay, DTM 2003, we had a problem with the splitter, grounding and porpoising. What did we do? And it's like, okay, looked at damping, looked at stiffnesses. We know that lifting the rider, it's not always the best thing to do for overall car performance. So knowing how to react, I was probably less concerned than I would have been had I never experienced it. But in terms of sitting down a year before and going, okay, guys, keep your eye on porpoising. No, not really. I've got to be honest. It was a discussion on and off when we knew that the car was going to be operating closer to the ground. But what we're seeing now was not, I would go as far as saying, not totally predicted by any team.
Right, back to drivers. Let's talk about your current guys at AlphaTauri. First of all, Pierre Gasly, such a brilliant season last year. You've just confirmed that he's staying with the team in 2023. What is Pierre's greatest strength?
I mean, we've known Pierre a long time. He started out with us, he went away, he came back again. He's great. He's a fantastic team player, but we shouldn't confuse that with his push and desire to be successful. You know, when things are not right, he's clear in telling us. But the way he goes about doing it, his work rate's high. He works well with the engineers. The way he explains things, even the way, you know, the good and the bad in the team. He's very positive in driving everybody forwards, and he's very open to being pushed forward himself. So, as a team, he works well with us, and he's ambitious. He's signed for next year. We need to give him a bloody good car next year. He's a good asset. The pressure's on to make sure we can give him what he needs next year to continue on, on the path we want to be on. But he's good. We like working with him, and he's a smart guy, and he's developing as a driver still, and it's fantastic to see.
Is he on a par with Max Verstappen, Carlos Sainz, who you worked with back in 2015?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, we were involved with Carlos and Max at the start of their career, and it was clear that they had the traits of being talented drivers. And Pierre, when we started working with him, shows the same traits, and he's developed from that point, really. So yeah, there's a lot of similarities. I mean, those two guys are really good examples. They were great. They came in to Toro Rosso as it was, and they were competitive and really strong and dedicated and working hard. And Pierre's shown all the same traits, really. So yeah, he's another driver out the same mould.
And he's driving brilliantly, but how bruised was he by that experience at Red Bull Racing, do you think?
I mean, I think Pierre himself has been clear in explaining his feelings and emotions over that. But in all honesty, he left our team, he came back, he hopped in the car, and we got on with it without any consideration of what had come from him. He was straight back on it. It was like he'd never been away. And I have to say, it's a credit to him that he just got on with it. There was no sad face or anything. And straight away, we were really happy to be working with him again. And it's not something we talked about a lot, really. He came, before we came back, we suddenly thought, I wonder what he's going to be like. But in all credit to him, he got straight back on with it. And the engineers got on with it. And we've just worked with him, and we're happy working with him. And believe it or not, it was not such a big thing. It was like, okay, we know him, he's coming back, let's crack on.
Jody, was he a better driver for that experience?
Yes, certainly. Yeah, definitely. I think so. I think, it's often said, you learn from good and bad experiences, but he came back a better driver, and he came back mentally strong, and which is why I say there was no big drama, really. He knew what he wanted to do, he knew where he wanted to go. We were at a point where we had a bit of an upturn in form. The car was looking good. He contributed to the development of that car. So we never really had any point where we were saying, I don't know really what's going on here. He was straight on it. So it was that straightforward for us, which was fantastic.
Oh my God, guys, we did it again! Oh my God, yes! P1, Pierre! P1! We just won the race. I just want to say congrats to all of you. All of you. All of you did an amazing job. AlphaTauri, Honda, all the engineers, all the mechanics, everybody in Faenza. Thanks to you, we did it. We did it. Yeah!
If you're looking to enjoy a stress-free summer, let HelloFresh take care of your mealtimes with their convenient home delivery of delicious, easy-to-use meal kits that will make you feel like you're eating restaurant-quality dinners at home. You're sure to find something for everyone for every day of the week. I've tried plenty of HelloFresh's recipes in the past, and they never disappoint. All the ingredients were provided for me, so there were no last-minute trips to the grocery store, and the easy, step-by-step guide made it so simple I often had dinner on the table in under 30 minutes. Now that's unheard of in the Clarkson household. If you're looking for some new summer dishes, I recommend trying their Taste of Summer series that are sure to become everyone's new favourites, like the Old Bay shrimp and sausage boil and the family-style grilled steak lettuce wraps. Or you can just bust out the grill and feel like a pro with HelloFresh's cookout collection with recipes like their melty Monterey Jack burgers. The onion jam is a real game changer. You can tailor your HelloFresh order to meet your needs, change your delivery days, adjust your dietary requirements, and even skip a week if you want to. Make it work for you. Go to hellofresh.com/grid16 and use the code GRID16 for up to 16 free meals and 3 free gifts. That's hellofresh.com/grid16 for up to 16 meals free and 3 free gifts. HelloFresh, America's #1 meal kit. Jody, tell us a little bit now about Yuki's potential. How has he improved since last year?
How has he improved from last year? I think, he's quicker. Obviously, it's a different set of regulations, a different car, but looking at the data, he's faster, he's more consistent, and stating the obvious, he's making less mistakes. However, he's still a relatively new driver, and he's very early in his career. He's also had to adapt to a new car the second year of his career, and that's not to be underestimated, I think, for any of these young drivers. Some of the guys who've come in earlier have been dealing with evolutions of car. He's dealt with the revolution of car, You know, he's on a good learning curve. It's not easy. The car's not as competitive as last year's yet, so it's harder to showcase for him. But he's pushing Pierre harder now, and he's developing nicely. And he's on a good path. You know, we're not there yet. He's not the finished product. He'd say that himself. He's developing well, but he's got a long way to go, and we've got a long way to go to develop the car. So, yeah, so far so good. You know, we're sort of midterm exams. We are as we are, and we'll keep going, and we're confident he'll keep developing.
You say he's quicker than last year. When you look at the data, where is he quicker?
There's two things. He's adapting to Formula One, and even though they've had a regulation change, the way he was driving the car evolved even through last year. You know, at the start of the year, he had some good results out of the box, and everyone was like, oh, wow, Yuki's great. But like a lot of rookies, you know, when you do the analysis, they start well, and then they go through a bit of a purple patch, and he did. He went through a point where his confidence dipped, and he was questioning himself and questioning what he wanted to do with the car, and then he popped out the other side of that. And towards the end of last year, I think he'd understood how he wanted the car set up. His driving had also evolved to give him a wider range of setups he could sort of digest, and he's just carried that form on, really. I think the Yuki we've got now, it's easier to set a car up for him than it was mid-season last year, where a combination of not really being sure what he wanted, and you know, the shunts and mistakes affecting his confidence. You know, he went through that patch, but he's come out the other side of that, and he's much more able to say now what he wants from the car, and I think that's a good thing, and that's a milestone with any rookie. You know, worked with other drivers before that have gone through patches where, you know, they've got the talent, but the races are not going their way, or they're making silly mistakes, or they're suffering from reliability fusses, which means they're missing mileage. And I think his path navigating that has not been different from a number of other rookies, but the expectations are high. Yeah, we're a solid midfield team, and we're meant to deliver, and it's a lot harder for him than it would be if we were pounding around at the back and he could quietly get on with the business of becoming a better driver.
What's his feedback like?
Again, it's improving. You know, it's not bad.
Does he swear as much as he did? Or?
Yeah. I mean, honestly, we do talk to him about that, and he does take it on board. But in the heat of the moment, yeah, he's one of the. He's got some choice language, which I imagine he didn't pick up at language school. The engineers deal with it, and they're very polite and nice back to him. But we often remind him that it's probably not the most descriptive way to improve the car, but it's part of being him. And on the flip side, people sometimes say that the drivers don't show enough character. Well, he's showing a character. Maybe people don't like what they hear, but we typically know what he means. And then when we've debriefed at the end of the race, everything's calmed down. It's gone, okay, we understand what you're saying, but let's try and find a better way to communicate it. I've worked with drivers before who've been like that, probably in an era when we recorded less of what the drivers said and communicated less of what the drivers said. But for me, I've been down that road. What I will say is I think the engineers are fantastically polite. I'm not sure I was that polite when I was a race engineer in reply, but again, if my mum had heard me, she wouldn't have been so pleased with some of the replies I was potentially giving drivers.
Jody, have you spent more time with Yuki since he's moved to Faenza, and we're told he's coming into the factory a lot? Franz is putting him through his paces. I assume you are as well, right?
Yeah, I mean, having him there more, he's around more, and, you know, he'll pop in for a chat, and or when he's around more, you take the opportunity to have more discussions with him, and I do that. A lot of my more detailed discussions are through the engineers. You know, we'll run through certain things with the engineers and say, right, these are the key points you need to communicate to the driver and get him in the loop on these points, but don't worry about these points, because, you know, there's certain things he needs to be focused on and certain things which are just noise in the background. So I do a lot of my detailed communication through the vehicle performance group and the race engineering group. But yeah, I have a sit down with him and we talk and say things, and it's good to learn about each other. He probably understands me a bit more now and knows what type of guy I am, and I know a bit more about him, because there's a lot more to us all than what we see at the track. So meeting at the factory and maybe having a discussion around a coffee, it probably helps us both, I'd say.
Now, you've mentioned that from Tyrell, you went to X-Track, where you were a gearbox designer. You then worked in the DTM with Opel, then Aston Martin in sports cars. What brought you back to Formula One?
I went to X-Track and I sort of specialised as a gearbox designer, which was fantastic. I wanted to get a skill set, and but I was always keen to get into race engineering, and that's how I ended up going out to Germany. I was to do design and engineering work. I ended up just doing engineering work, and then I went to Aston Martin as a designer and an engineer. But in the background, Formula One was sort of something I always wanted to do, but I was enjoying DTM, but family life and marriage brought me back to the UK, and it was always nibbling away in the background. And then I can't remember exactly, I think there was I think someone said, Jordan Midland as it was, are looking for a race engineer, and I thought, why not? And I was at Peugeot. I was happy enough there. Sports car racing was okay. But And I think I thought, well, why not? I'll apply. And then I think I had 2 interviews in like 3 nights or something. I can't remember. Next thing I know, I've accepted the position and I've told ProDrive I'm leaving and I'm up and running. And that was it, really. And then I served my notice and I was back in. And I think within about 2 days of being there, I thought, this is fantastic. I'm really pleased I've come back to Formula One. But yeah, it was no specific strategy. Someone told me there was a job available. And I think my wife said to me, go on, you may as well apply. You keep talking about it, go back to it and give it a go. And I did. And then from that moment on, it was like, this is great. And I was a race engineer and loved it. Yeah.
And that was Midland F1 that then went on to become Force India. How much of a sea change was it there when Vijay Mallya got involved?
It was Midland. I enjoyed. Again, it was a young engineering team. James Key was the technical director. It was fantastic. Again, a smaller team with more exposure to things than you would get in a bigger team. I loved it. We were all in one office and learned a lot. It was a fantastic experience. It was a small team. We were struggling, difficult times, but I really enjoyed it. And it was quite a good little car, the 2006 car. I really enjoyed engineering. It was nice. And then there was Spiker Force India. Vijay came along, bought the team. I remember he called a meeting, he got a lot of people into a room and sort of said, I'm taking over the team. What do you guys want? I can't remember the exact details, but I was there with Giampiero Lambiese, who's now Verstappen's engineer, and I think we basically said, one a Mercedes power unit, McLaren rear end, and Alonso was something like that, I can't remember. And we got the Mercedes engine, we got the McLaren rear end, and we got a driver shootout, which is how we got Fisichella. We went along and did a test, we put 6 or 8 drivers in. We did a driver shootout and selected who we wanted. So it was fantastic. That was 2008, 2009. So to be fair to Vijay, he sat down, he listened to people, and it was a late call on the rear end and the power unit, but that set us up for 2009. So we did 2008 with the Ferrari power unit. And again, as a race engineer, that was fantastic. Driver shootout was great. That car was a quick car, and I enjoyed my final year there. So it was good working for him at that time. I only did 2 years under Force India, Vijay's ownership, but I loved it. It was great.
Then Caterham.
Yeah. Honestly, I was super happy at Force India as a race engineer. I loved it. But again, out of the blue, someone contacts me and said, you interested in being a chief engineer, another step on your career. It's a new team. Okay. So I decided to jump ship because it was a career progression. I underestimated the size of the task, I have to say. 2010, so the first year for the new teams. Never worked so hard in my life. Incredible. It was a struggle. Again, I learnt a lot, but it was brutal, the amount of work.
Because you were lacking in staff, or why was it such hard work?
I mean, out of the 3 new teams, to be fair to Tony Fernandez and the technical guys who set it up, they'd done a good job trying to get as far as they had, but I probably underestimated what was needed to be competitive quickly. And also, these teams had joined up under the premise of a budget cap. I think it was 60, 70 million or something back then. And then the rules changed and all of a sudden you're going up against these established teams. And out of the 3 new teams, we were the best prepared, I would say, with all respect to the other teams. Good driver lineup with Jarno and Kovalainen. It was good. But the amount of things that you have to do just to get established, it was brutal. And I enjoyed it and we did a good job. 2010, 2011, we were on a good trajectory. But the task is massive, and for the new teams, it was tough. And as I said, I learnt a lot. But by 2012, I was worn out, which is when I stepped away from trackside, really, because I was just like, this is incredible. I can't carry on like this. It's killing me.
What, flat out back at the factory?
I was travelling
flat out.
Yeah, I was travelling to all the races. I was very busy. It wasn't just me. Everyone was flat out. And I was finding it really difficult, and I had the opportunity to take a factory role as operations director, and we were going to move to Leafield to the new facility, and I was really keen to be involved in setting that up, renovation of the factory, because the factory needed a lot of work on it, buying machinery, improving infrastructure. So I moved over to that role. And in all honesty, it was as tiring as it was travelling, because we were trying to move base and grow the team, and then things started to go downhill with the team, and it got even more difficult. And I learned so much being operations director and all these new experiences, but when you haven't got a cash flow and the money's difficult, it becomes harder and harder and harder, and you're learning a lot and you're getting very streetwise, but you're thinking, how are we going to be competitive when we're fighting these sort of challenges?
So Toro Rosso come knocking. I think the first job back in 2014 was head of vehicle performance, and did you have to think twice?
I mean, as I've just described with the Caterham business, I was operations director and it was getting tough. And I was getting a bit tired and a bit weary. Still big believer in Formula One, believed in the project. James Key was technical director at Toro Rosso. got in contact and said, "You interested?" And it was a move back into the technical side from the operations side. And I thought, you know what, I think I am. James had been doing what looked like some really good stuff at Tyrell, and I'd worked with James at Midland, Spiker, Force India, got a lot of time for James, great guy. So, yeah, went and had a chat. I thought, yeah, why not? So, next thing I know, I'm at Tyrell and, went over, joined in the September 2014 as head of vehicle performance group. And, it was fantastic, back into the technical side and loved it. Great bunch of guys, fantastic support from Red Bull. No budget issues, no cash flow issues, just get on with the job and making the car fast. So refreshing after Caterham, which was the polar opposite in the last months.
And you've lived in England, you've lived in Germany.
Yeah.
How is living in Italy?
It works quite well. We've got 100 people in Bicester at the wind tunnel. We've got 350, 400 odd people in Faenza. So I work between the two sites. And right from joining in 2014, I was working between the two sites, plus a little bit of Grand Prix attendance. So you sort of make it work. Italy's fantastic in weather terms and the food. And Faenza's a nice little town. Toro Rosso and AlphaTauri now are very good at setting me up with an apartment and looking after all of those sorts of things. My wife and kids would come out in all the school holidays. And it just works.
So they've stayed in the UK?
Yeah, they've stayed in the UK. I'm in the UK probably 25%, 30% of my time now. It sort of works. And I travel to a lot of Grand Prix, a lot from the UK, so you sort of make it work. And they come out to Italy, and for them it's a holiday home. For me, it's a base when I'm working in Italy. And it works, really. I mean, the idea was, okay, we'll give it 3 years. Normally your contract length's 3 years. And I've been there 7, and I don't remember it being a big discussion point. Everyone's just happy to roll on with it. It works. It's as I said, it's like a holiday home for them, and they enjoy the experience, I think.
Now, I remember first going to Faenza in 1998 to interview Esteban Tuero, and back then the factory was little more than just a few little sheds.
Yeah.
And it really was like that. What is it like now? How has it evolved?
I mean, it's evolved massively. I mean, when I joined, we were still in what were referred to me as the Minardi buildings, these various concrete buildings, but they'd built a new manufacturing facility, and next door to it, they were starting work on what is now our base. So I think I did about a year and a half in the old buildings. And after working at Leafield Technical Centre, it was a bit of a shock initially. There was people in porter cabins because they were moving people around. The team had grown massively. We weren't really geared up for it. But then we moved into a new facility, and it's fantastic. It's 3 floors. It's all the latest mod cons, and that's great. It's changed a lot. We filled the building. We're expanding again now. But after that short period of time in these other buildings, it was great to work into sort of a cutting edge facility with everyone in the same building. You're not having to sort of walk down the road on a hot day to find a guy from the CFD group or something. So it's been fantastic.
When you've got a team like Ferrari, not just down the road, but in global terms just down the road, how difficult is it for you guys to attract technical talent? Because are they the magnet? Anyone who wants to go and live in Italy and work in Formula One will go to the red team, not the blue and white team.
Yeah, I mean, I think naturally, the history of Ferrari and who they are a magnet in Italy. It's the biggest and the most popular Formula One team in Italy. We're there as well. But honestly, recruitment's never easy to get the people you want, but we do manage to do it. I think as the team's grown, we become more competitive, the team's become more well known. It does help, but it's probably easier for Ferrari to recruit. But potentially, on occasions, we're looking for something slightly different to Ferrari. We might want a slightly broader skill base, or maybe we'll take a risk on more younger engineers and really, try to take young talent and grow it as quickly as possible. So it is like that. Recruitment's never easy, but and there's less. In Motorsport Valley in the UK, it's probably easier. Well, it is easier because I've been through that process in the UK. But we manage, and I think we've got a lot of attributes in the team now, which we're developing, which make us attractive to people. We're punching above our weight, and I think we're doing a good job, and people want to come along and be part of that, I think.
It's never too late to develop a new skill or add another string to your bow. And if you've always regretted not paying more attention to your language classes at school, Babbel can help you put those regrets to bed. With Babbel, you can learn a new language with as little as just 15-minute daily lessons. There are 14 different languages to choose from, including German, French, Spanish, and Italian, and it's available as an app or online, so you can log on and take a lesson whenever and wherever you want to, and your progress will be synced across all devices. What I love about it is that they design their courses with practical, real-world conversations in mind, which wasn't always the case with textbooks of old, was it? They focus on useful vocabulary, so you're learning things you'll actually use in everyday life. And it's all thanks to the fact that their lesson plans are designed by real-life language experts, so you really get that personal touch. And their speech recognition technology can even help you improve your accent and pronunciation. In addition to lessons, you can also access podcasts, games, videos, or even join live classes with a language teacher. Right now, Babbel is offering our listeners 6 months free with a purchase of a 6-month subscription with the promo code GRID. So go to babbel.com/play and use the promo code GRID for an extra 6 months free. That's Babbel, BABBEL.com/play, promo code GRID. Babbel, language learning that works. So you're the technical boss. What about the team principal, Franz Tost? He's a very keen racer.
Yep.
What does he like to work with?
I'd heard various stories about Franz before I joined, as you do about lots of people who are senior in teams. But honestly, Franz is a racer, and he'll say what he thinks, and I like that. I like the straightforwardness. But at the end of the day, he's fantastically supportive, and he doesn't attempt to design the car. He'll give his opinion, but I got a pretty free hand. Having said that, when things don't go right, I'm the one that the first person he'll go to, asking questions, wanting explanation, giving me his opinion. So he is a racer, and he wants the best for the team. And he's AlphaTauri through and through, and he really wants it. And we want to deliver for him, because I like to see the smile on his face, and I like to know on Monday morning I can have a coffee before we start the discussion. But he's really supportive as a boss, and he has his moments, but he's good, and you always know where you stand with him, and that's important. If something's not right, you know that, and if something's good, you know that as well. And everything I've asked for since I've been accountable and responsible, he's delivered on.
Right, that's his leadership style. Yeah. How would you describe yours?
I'd like to think I'm straightforward. I try to be. That probably means I say things that some people don't like on occasions, but I also try to explain myself. I try to put, I've got a good group of people around me, heads of the various departments, be it design, aero, vehicle performance, IT, R&D. And, I try to engage them a lot and use their skills, because they've all got skills, and the people who work for them have got skills that are far more detailed than mine in any specific area. I'm just a glue that tries to bond it all together and get the best out of it. So, I think I'm pretty straightforward and pragmatic. Hopefully they appreciate that. It's probably a different management style to what they were used to in the past, and maybe it's something different to what they'll be used to in the future. But, I try to be pretty straightforward and focus on what we can control and extract the most out of it. Our objectives are clearly communicated, and we want to make the most of our skills, which is to be a quick react team and sort of agile team. We're a small team, we're meant to be agile, and that's what I really promote. And I have to make the decisions at the end of the day, but I try to really get the most out of the people I work with, because a lot of them have got all of them have got some fantastic contributions to make. So as I said, my job is to extract the most out of them and make sure we stay on track and make the tricky decisions.
Talking of tech bosses, who have been your inspirations in history, not just now?
Growing up, reading all manner of engineering books. There's certain books you've read more than others ever, but just in general terms, you see what Gordon Murray, Adrian Newey, they're guys who've done fantastic things, and we've all seen the successes and the way they've gone. John Barnard's another one. They're not people I know personally to any great degree, but they're people that you can look at and say, they did some interesting stuff. It was really impressive. People that I work with, Peter Digby at X-Track. It's not a race team, but Pete's way of doing things and the responsibility that he gave the designers there and the engineers, he'd really let you get on with it. Very straightforward guy, and I got a lot to thank him for. When I went into his office and said, look, I want to go car racing, I want to go and do Formula 3 or DTM, he went, well, we don't want to lose you, but do you know what, I'll see if I can help you out. And he didn't have to do that, and he gave me a job from Tyrell. He knew some people at Tyrell. He helped me out. So people have helped me out and give me opportunities I think are worthy of mention. I enjoyed working with James, fantastic guy, James Key. Worked with him on twice now, and just their way of working, you learn a lot and you get a lot of freedom to do things. And I think that's important, because it allows you to sort of improve your skills, knowing that there's a safety net there.
Can you give us a little indication as to how your working day is, in terms of how much of it is focused on the current car, how much of it is on regulations? We're all talking about the power unit regulations for 2026, aren't we? Yeah. How much of it is talking to the accountants about the budget cap? I mean, can you just shed a bit of light on that for us?
Yeah, I mean, we'll start with the budget cap bit. Yeah, I'm a lot more familiar with the chief accountant at AlphaTauri now. We're best friends, or worse friends, depends what the topic is. So that's something I've had to, build into my schedule.
How frustrating is that, having to talk about budgets? Or have you always had to do that?
I mean, it's an interesting one. My time at Caterham, when we had interesting scenarios with cash flow, I found myself getting really into it. Not because I wanted to, but because it was critical stuff when I was operations director. So I had an overview of it, but from the other end of the spectrum, that is, oh my God, we haven't got enough money to do what we need to do. Now, you know how much money you've got, it's the budget cap, and you've got to make it work for you. So, yeah, you have to give time over to it. It's a reality of Formula One now. So on a daily basis, I'm speaking to the financial people. We have a good system where every morning there'll be an update on where you are, and then I'll be updating him on where we're going with car development and watching his hair turn grey and fall out. And then in reply, he'll be telling me where we are with the budget cap, and I might have a sleepless night. So it's that sort of thing. So there's that. And then there's the usual regulation stuff. There's a lot of activity regarding future regulations, technical working group. I'm the representative for AlphaTauri there. So when the agendas come through, speaking to all my direct reports, asking them to look at certain things, getting the feedback, communicating that back out, speaking to vehicle performance group, race analysis, car development with the aero group. So I'm talking to all of the heads day in, day out. I've just spent the last 3 days prior to here based at the wind tunnel, so my focus has been more towards aero stuff because I'm split my time between Faenza and all the aero activities in the UK. So yeah, a lot of emails. You have to give away time just to chip away at where you are with emails and put priorities on things. So it's a little bit of everything, really.
A lot of meetings?
Yeah, a lot of meetings.
When did you last actually design something?
Years ago. And I would imagine a lot of designers would say, thank God. So it's, I might sit in a meeting and say, have you thought about this? Have you thought about that? And on occasions, I can only imagine the look on their faces. I might sketch something, point at it ferociously and then walk off. But in terms of sitting at a CAD station, I might look at a CAD viewer a couple of times a week and see what's going on. But if I'm designing things, something's gone wrong. And not because they've made a mistake, it means because our system's broken. That's not my role now. Like if I was engineering a car this weekend, that's wrong. Something's gone very wrong if you find yourself doing that. As I said, I'm the glue that should bring it all together now.
It's busy, busy, busy. I can see that. Do you have time for any hobbies outside of Formula One? I mean, your passion for motorbikes, you talked about that earlier.
Yeah, I mean, family, you've got to find time for family. I've got an 18-year-old and a 13-year-old son and a wife, and the first focus is giving time over to them. My eldest son's just gone through his last set of exams, and my youngest son's heading into his GCSEs. And
are they interested in engineering?
Yeah, my eldest son is more interested in digital marketing and that sort of thing, and my youngest son is into motocross and is into engineering, so maybe he's going more that way, but I don't force them. They must do what they enjoy at that age. So the first thing is putting time into the family. You mentioned motorbikes, big motorbike nut. If I hadn't gone to Formula One, it would have been MotoGP. That was the other thing. I ride motorbikes, I love them. I've got a few bikes at home. UK weather doesn't let me enjoy them.
What have you got?
So I've got Ducati 916, so it's a classic late 90s superbike.
Yeah.
It's, the thing that Fogarty was
sounds
around
amazing.
Yeah, fantastic bit of kit. I'm probably a bit old to ride it in a sporting manner now, but I have that, which I ride as much as I can, which isn't too often. BMW HP2, which is another sports bike that's far too quick for me, and a couple of old two-stroke bikes, which was the stuff from my youth.
Do you do track days?
I used to, not now, because I need to go to work on Monday, and I'm sure fans wouldn't be too happy if I call in from hospital. So.
Jody, what is it about motorbikes and engineers? I know so many engineers in this paddock who are passionate about two wheels.
Yeah, I mean, it was my thing before cars. I mean, you can ride a motorbike before you can drive a car.
Is it as simple as that?
It's that, and the fact that, again, it could be a cliche. I like to think I'm a sensible rider. My wife would disagree, but I quite like the risk. Not the risk, but I quite like the fact you've got to concentrate, and you've got to be respectful and careful when you're on it. And honestly, the performance of these bikes is fantastic. Although you get nowhere near the envelope on the road, the edge of the envelope. On the odd day I've done a track day, for a moment I thought I'm fantastic, followed by the next moment thinking I don't have the talent. But I quite like the idea of just reminding myself of the talent I don't have. And they're fantastic and they're great to look at. And it's the closest thing you can get to a race bike. You can't run a Ducati 916 SPS is pretty close to a world superbike of the mid-90s. There's not a car equivalent. So I quite like that sort of thing.
I think you're a madman. When we're talking two wheels, is it two wheels and engines or bicycles as well?
Bicycles. So I was also designing and building my own bikes back in the day, and I used to race mountain bikes and road bikes, and for a short moment I thought that could be a career, but then I realised again, talent is a requirement. So I moved towards designing stuff. So yeah, I was always well into that, and I was making bikes on and off, and then I can't remember now, about 10 years ago I had the idea I wanted to design a mountain bike, so I designed one. And I thought, well, I haven't got time to make it. I'll see if I can get someone to make it for me. And I ended up speaking to various companies out in Taiwan. Can you make me this bike? And the next thing I know, I couldn't find someone to make it. But I came across this guy who said, well, I've got a company that I don't want anymore. He was Wilkie Cycles. He said, I've got suppliers and everything lined up. I've never actually made a bike, but I've got it all lined up for a ridiculously small price. I'll give you access to all of that. So my wife actually bought the company. It's her company. And I bought this company and went, right, great, I'll get my titanium bike made. And then, what about it? Let's make a few bikes and see if we can sell them. Next thing we know, just containers of bikes coming over from Taiwan to the UK. And I've got an online bicycle business. And we ran it for a couple of years. And
this whilst working in Formula One?
I was at Caterham at the time, and I was thinking, well, if it all goes wrong at Caterham, this looks like this is the next thing. Next thing I know, I'm in Tyrosso, and it's like, oh no. So my wife ran it for a couple of years alongside another business that she's got her own business, and then we went, this isn't really working. The idea was great, and it was a fantastic business, but I haven't got time for this. So I sold the business about a year before the pandemic. Thank God, because looking at it now, the idea of importing things from the other side of the world would be more of a challenge. So yeah, it was a hobby and a mad idea that ended up owning a company for 3 or 4 years. It was fantastic, but yeah, by chance really. So yeah, it probably says something about my character more than my solid business acumen. It was profit making, but probably not the smartest move ever.
Jody, you're a man who has many strings to his bow. That is evident. Look, it's been wonderful to have you on the show. Thank you so much. Let's end it just by looking ahead to 2023. We know you've got Pierre Gasly. Don't know what the future is with Yuki yet, but you're starting to think about next year's car already. How hopeful are you for next season?
I mean, honestly, sort of starting at the board objective, we want to be in the top 5 in the Constructors Championship, and that's it. Last year we had a car to do it, and we didn't do it, and that hurts. This year we're not there yet, but we're still developing the car, and that's the target, and that's the target for next year. Now we've got half a season to go. We've got development still coming through, but the technical brief is that's what that car's got to deliver, and we've I've just spent the last few days in the winter and a lot of discussions starting up about next year and where we're going with the car, and that's it, and that's what we're fired up to achieve. We've got the drivers to do it. We've proven we can develop a car to do it. We've just got to bring it all together. So that's what we want. And anything else is under delivery. And if we don't deliver, if we're 6th this year, as far as I'm concerned, technically, we've under delivered. There's no excuse because we're capable of doing it, because we nearly delivered it last year. The car was capable of it. So it's like that. And that's what we want to do. We want to be fighting in the midfield consistently. And that's where we need to be. And that's where we're trying to structure the team towards being. And it's that simple, really. And I think we can achieve it, and that's, I'm currently tasked with doing that, so that's it.
Well, best of luck with that. Thank you, Jody.
Thank you, thanks a lot.
He's straight talking, isn't he? And given the competitiveness of the midfield this year, whichever team finishes 5th in the Constructors' Championship is going to have done a really good job. Jody, that was a wonderful conversation. Thank you very much. You've had a fascinating career to date, and your story will no doubt help to inspire the next generation of F1 engineers as well. Thanks for your time, and best of luck for the remainder of the season. As ever, please remember to send in your thoughts and stories about Jody. Have you worked with him? Which of his cars to date has been your favourite? Or his bikes for that matter? Send what you've got to me at Tom Clarkson F1 on Twitter, or use the hashtag F1BeyondTheGrid. Which segues nicely into what you sent in after last week's show with David Richards. DR has so much motorsport pedigree, and many of you enjoyed hearing from him. Let's start with this from Amit Mandalia. Just listen to the latest episode, really insightful from DR, who should have got a ProDrive F1 entry. My 2 stories about ProDrive are these. I did a factory tour on my 30th birthday, and in 2015, one of their Astons carried my name at Le Mans, and I had the crash-damaged wing. How great is that? Amit's even sent in a picture of his name on the car. That's a great story, and lovely to hear from you again, Amit. Next up, how about this from Sean Tumalisa? Great interview with DR, he says. Jensen is one of my favourite drivers in Formula 1, and DR is probably Jensen's closest friend. I also liked when he talked about the 3 aspects of being a 30-point score driver. Yes, Sean, his 30-point analysis was fascinating. Not many get the full 30, do they? And why not have a think about who would get the full 30 on the current grid? Now that's food for thought, isn't it? And let's do one more. This from Gavin Richardson. In my opinion, says Gavin, this is my favourite episode of yours so far. It's a shame DR only did 4 seasons as an F1 team principal. ... For now. Well, Gavin, you've left that hanging. Imagine if DR came back to Formula 1 now. It would be quite a story, wouldn't it? Well, look, thanks for all your messages. We love reading them. We also love reading your suggestions for future guests and your reviews. Leave us one on your podcast app and don't forget to follow us. It's the best way to get our new episodes. Well, that's pretty much it for this week. If you'd like something else to listen to, why not check out our interviews with Jody Egginton's AlphaTauri teammates, Pierre Gasly, Yuki Tsunoda and Franz Tost. There are links to those episodes in the description for this one. Thanks everyone for listening. F1 Beyond the Grid is produced by F1 and Audio Boom Studios. Until next time, keep it flat out.